Stop start.
And action.
Okay. I'm Jenny Seek, and I'm a practicing intuitive and tarot card reader and Jungian counselor. And I'm going to shed some light tonight on what archetypes are, how they function, and how they show up in us and evoke certain things in us and inspire certain energies and certain manifestations, certain symbol recognition and excitement in us. And then also how they are out in the world, because they have two different functions. So the first thing that I thought I would start with tonight was just a little brief discussion about Jungian psychology, who Jung was, and how he fits into the scope of what Jungian psychology is today, because it's gotten a lot broader. It's a much more metaphysical, spiritual way of connecting now than pure Jungian psychology was in the beginning. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, and he first worked with mental health patients in Switzerland. And he worked with Freud for a while and then separated from Freud because their basic way of understanding the libido, which is the energy that inspires and evokes us and draws us to get excited about things, was different. He believed, Freud believed, that it had primarily to do with a connection with the body, and that we could understand through our habits where our energy lay. Jung believed that the libido was connected to the idea of our spirituality. It was connected to the idea of ascension, and that we had within us a deep, deep need and desire to grow toward things that were outside of ourselves. So to grow, like imagine a tree and the branches going up toward the sky. So imagine the idea that anything that was considered pathology, right, disease, every symptom was designed to pull us to a place in ourselves of more deepening awareness with ourselves and with our spirituality. So Jung and Freud separated because they worked together for a while, and then their philosophies diverged. One grew, the other one kind of stayed in the same place. When Jungian psychology came to the United States, because Freud was the precursor to that, there was a lot of misconstrual about the languaging. So the basic idea of psychology is based on soul work, Seele in the German. And what happened was, when the books were created in the very beginning of psychological thinking in the United States, Seele was discerned to be the body. So there was already this misconstrual here about what soul making was about. So, and because Jung grew up he was very, very wealthy, he was very separated from other classes. And so his psychology grew kind of in an insular way from the rest of the schools of psychology. And because of that, and because of the fact that it was Germanic, the language was Germanic, the languaging was very, very heavy. So a lot of people go, Jungian psychology, archetypes, oh, what's that, right? But that's because there's this layers of separation about what Jungian psychology really is. Jungian psychology is all around us. Any movie that you see, any book that you open, any poem that evokes something in you is based on the idea of archetypes. And archetypes are two things, like I said. They are these instinctual drives or potential awarenesses in us about what draws us in, what excites us, what we're drawn to. So when you go take a tarot class and you go, oh my gosh, I just love this Empress, I can't get enough of her, this relationship with the Divine Mother, oh my gosh, what does it mean in me, and what does it mean in the people around me? That's being caught up in an archetype, having an archetype activated in you. And so when that happens, you know very, very easily what draws you. The other thing is what repels you. So sometimes these archetypes can repel you. You can push away from them. You can go, I don't want to know anything about that hermit. I don't identify with that hermit at all. That's our shadow. And Jung talks about the idea of the shadow we need to embrace all these aspects in ourselves. And when we do, what happens is there is good and there is bad in any archetype. Not good or bad, but a negative way of looking at it or a positive way of looking at it. And the goal is to find that balance in between the two things, where something new is created. Jung called that the third thing. So that's a little bit about Jung and a little bit about Jungian psychology, but I wanted to open it up to you guys and ask you, what are archetypes? When I say the word archetype, what sticks? What do you think an archetype is? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Mother is an archetype, absolutely. Anybody else? Hero's journey. Yeah, Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey. Anybody else? Okay. So in the purest sense, archetypes are potentialities that are wanting to be expressed in us. So they're only archetypally activated in us if we're drawn toward them. So I can say Maverick, and I'll bet some people in here would go, oh yeah, I love those movies, and other people would be like, Maverick, Carpenter, but if you said to them Mother, they'd be like, oh my gosh, Mother, right? So that's the way we can start to understand what potentials are active in us, what archetypal potentials are active in us. Archetypes are feelings, they're images, they're impressions, they're stories, they're myths, and they're symbols that make us notice, feel, and draw towards something. They're fueled and sparked by energy in our bodies and ideas in our mind. Some of them will stick for us, and some of them won't. What happens is they create grooves in psyche and in our body. So the stories that we tell in our lives start to create repeated patterns, and that's how we hold energy. When people talk about energy blockages or a surge of energy coming through them, they're talking about these grooves of energy that have been created, what Jung calls complexes. And so complexes can be negative or positive. What they mean is that something does or doesn't match up. So when we have a positive complex, what happens is we might have an identification with a trip that we go on, and we go, oh my gosh, when I go on trips, everything goes right. Energy really gets jazzed, and I meet all these wonderful people, and that's a positive complex. We could also have a negative complex, right? So what happens then is we start to say, oh, when it's winter, nothing good happens, everything is bad, and I don't want to go out there, and there's nothing good about it. And so we can get real black and white in our thinking. And when we get black and white in our thinking, what happens is we don't have the amount of energy available in our intrapsychic systems to move forward in our life. And our culture really reinforces this black and white thinking. It's why we're in a lot of the struggles that we're in our lives right now, because we have a polarizing energy. We think something is all bad, all good, all wrong, all right, all forsaken, all chosen. And this can happen to us when we go through our lives. We can get stuck in these archetypal grooves, so to speak. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pass out these archetypes in a box. Everybody take one, and don't open it yet. And then everybody take a little magnet and pass them around. Huh? And you can keep your archetype in a box and work with it. So when everybody gets them passed around, you can open your box very carefully. Oh, everybody? Cool beans. All right. So open your box.
Wait. Take one.
Just one.
Just
Oh, you guys are still passing around the magnets.
Wait a
Okay,
minute.
cool.
Now, wait a minute. I'm trying to figure out how this works.
Just take one.
Oh,
Can you get it?
yeah, I
There you
got
go.
it.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay. Now open up your box. Put
Okay.
your little magnet on the bottom of the box, not inside, on the outside, underneath.
Wait a minute.
Got it? Do you need some help?
No, wait a minute. It's good. I guess it was stuck. Oh my gosh, it is sticking there.
Yeah. So what happens is this is how an archetype is constellated. Imagine that there are all these little, got it? All these little discrete things, say chakras, right? And you say, oh, my orange chakra, my second chakra, my sacral chakra is really working for me and I'm drawn to the color orange. That means that that energy of the second chakra is evoked for you and things are drawing toward that energy. So all those discrete little particles are drawing together like that magnet and they're creating relationships in relationship to each other. So say the archetype of the second chakra then becomes connected with tiger. That's for me. But anyway, and so we go, oh my gosh, when I see tigers, I see the color orange and my chakra is really lit up. My second chakra is really lit up and I've been dreaming about tigers and they show up on the shore of the Nile, right? And so we start to create these stories that aren't lived yet. They're stories that exist in our imagination and in our unconscious. And Jung talks about the idea of these energies becoming evoked for us. So they become alive in us. And for some of us, they're unconscious. Like we won't remember our dreams. That connection between the unconscious and the conscious is really separate for us. But they still help us and drive us and move us forward and help us pick out things that we are inspired by and we are drawn toward. On that journey, the journey of individuation, which Jung talks about, this journey of becoming more whole, accepting ourselves more fully, what happens is we become we develop this sense of the observing self, the self-reflective self, the self that can monitor or watch or notice all of the different expressions that are going on in us. And when that happens, we are more, our unconscious and our consciousness bridge and become extensions of each other so that we have more active information, more awareness about what spiritually jazzes us and how to move forward in our life. We step aside from the place of the ego, what we should do, how we should fix it, where we need to go to, what our families tell us we should do, what our culture tells us we should do, what our gender identifications tell us we should do. And we step into a place where we go, this feels right to me. This is what I want to do. And I know it because I can feel it in my dreams. I can feel it in my connection with my chakras. And that's when we know that what's called the feeling toned complex, which Jung talks about, is expressed in ourselves. Instead of being blocked, right, we go to a Reiki practitioner to release our energy. It's moving through us, and we have more active energy for our journey, for our imaginal journey, our inner life, and for what the choices that we make in our outer life are. So, so your box. Okay, so your box is the container. It is your life. It is your day. It is your relationships. It is your the space that you take up, how you contain your environment. The magnet is yourself. It is who you feel like you are. And the archetype is all of those little filaments that go, right? All the stories, dreams, imaginings, feelings that go. Now there are ones, imagine that there are ones in your box that don't gravitate toward that magnet. You just got to imagine this. They just sit there, okay? Those are archetypes that aren't relevant in your life. They're not relevant in your story. If we're in a place in ourself where we're really like our energy's really, really low and we're feeling really stuck in that place of the black and white that I was talking about, a great thing to do is to go out and explore with the energy of the seeker, like an archetypal seeker, and see if other things help that energy to gravitate toward us. At certain stages in our life, we have the opportunity to do this. In the midlife passage, right? When our hero's journey goes from being a literal thing, in our first part of our life, our hero's journey is a literal thing. It's about going out, getting in your first relationship, getting a career, having children if you're going to. It's literal, and it is about making moves in your life toward what you want your life to become. In the second part of our life, it's making peace with what we did or weren't able to create, manifest in our outer life. And that's when we go through the midlife passage. And because we're a very, very ego-based culture, we have a tendency to judge ourselves very harshly from the outside about that, like, oh, I should have had 2 children by now, I should have been with the right person, I should have made the right career move, all of these sorts of things. But really, in the second part of the hero's journey, it's about making peace. So it's not literal. It is about our imaginal relationship to what we've done in the past. And that's the midlife passage. It asks us to move into a place in ourselves that is less focused on our ego. And it's more focused on the connection that we have with others. Jung talks about this in terms of his work with mandalas. If you guys have ever had dreams about mandalas, those are self-regulating forces, energies in the psyche, that help us to connect energetically with other people. So the collective unconscious, the idea of the collective unconscious, the idea that we're all one and we're all connected and we're all moving toward harmony, right, can be seen in the expression of the mandala because the symmetry is so even and the colors move forward and create a harmonious, picture. And that represents kind of a firming up and a solidity and a coming together of ourself. And at the same time, a breaking apart. So when people say they're having a midlife crisis, right, that's what that is. It's this breaking apart and coming together to create a new form. So, Jung talked about the feeling-toned complex. What this is unregulated feelings, strong feelings, positive or negative, in the psyche that give voice, depth, and breadth to symbols in our life. So I talked a little bit about complexes and how they have to do. Okay, complexes are when we have energy that has kind of outworn its usefulness for us. So when we're telling stories about who we should be, what we should do, what we're doing is we're going through a place where we're caught up in a complex, and Jung talks about that. We normally have a lot of energy in our bodies for our lives, but when we get caught up in a complex, creating this same groove over and over and over again, we don't have that same amount of energy for our lives and for the choices in our lives. So, and that leads to blockages, like I said. Okay, so it leads to black and white thinking. And black and white thinking, right? It makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we know things. But it leads to limiting beliefs about ourselves and about others. And limiting beliefs lead to judgments. So, first it is, I am not like this. Everybody else is different than me. Or everybody else is the same and they are different, right? And we're seeing this on the grand scale in terms of our, rise of different groups that say this is bad and this is good and this is right and this is wrong. So what this leads to is not being able to hold the center of a thing. Jung talks about the idea of the tension of the opposites. So the tension of the opposites is seen when we can holistically embrace a whole thing in ourselves. So it's when we can say, well, maybe I didn't make the best choice in a partner back then, but they taught me so much about myself and they taught me what I won't gravitate toward again. And that's when we start to hold the tension of the opposites. And instead of saying, this is all bad and I never should have been with this person, right? And that's a stage that we go through of anger and denial and, that's a defense mechanism, etc. and so forth. But what happens when we really have access to all of this energy and psyche is we're able to pull it all together and we become the container for our lives. So what we do, if we've done it right or wrong or good or bad, is kind of immaterial because we're holding ourselves. So the tension of the opposites when we're in a place where we can't hold these two opposites, what happens is we go into an overvaluation of mind. We overvalue the rational. We overvalue what we did. We are critical of what we didn't do, this sort of thing. Let's see. And this leads to limiting beliefs. If this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't happen. I can't do this with this body. I can't do this at this age. If this happens, then this will happen. This is not me. All of these ideas are limiting beliefs. So then we go to see our metaphysical practitioner to do whatever to get rid of limiting beliefs. But it's something that we can do for ourselves. And you can do it with a witness there, which can help to mirror you. But really, we can do this in ourselves by going out and connecting with nature, by drawing a picture. All of those kinds of creative pursuits will help us to break down that black and white thinking and move beyond those limited belief systems. So then what we get to do is we get to hold the tension of the opposites, and that's something Jung talks about. The idea of holding the tension of the opposites means that it's okay to be in love and mad at someone. Both of those things are okay. We can be in love and mad and still love them and still be mad at them. Or we can be looking for a job and not a loser, right? So these sorts of ideas help us to hold the tension of the opposites. But they require us to go beyond the place of the head. They require us to go beyond the place of thinking, into the place of the heart, the gut, the body, which holds these energies. So that's how archetypes are in here. Archetypes are also out there in the world. They're stories that exist out there in the world about who we could be. And they help us to tell stories in our lives. They help us to identify with different characters. So the mother, the hero, Stirny, the hermit, all of these sorts of things. The great mother, the saboteur, the father, the seeker, the gypsy. So I ask you to look at your own life and think about which archetypes are active in your life and how they show up for you. Archetypes help us to activate our imagination. They help us to set our intention. They help us to work with manifestation. And they help us to embrace metaphor in our life. They awaken our inner life. They connect us with our spirituality. They connect us with our dreams and our subtle awarenesses and our myths and our connection with nature. They're doorways to numinous and spiritual connections in ourselves. And they help us develop ourselves internally. They help us connect to a sense of what our inner work is. Chakras, tarot, crystals, all of these kinds of things that help us start to have these inner journeys as we're having these outer journeys in the world. So, the thing we have a tendency to do, though, is we have a tendency to literalize these ideas. So, you know, when you go to a dream dictionary and it says, frogs always mean this, right? This is something that we do when we're way too in our head. We go, oh, this always means this in terms of the black and white thinking. And what that does is it doesn't allow the archetype, the energy, the symbol to have a life that lives parallel to our life. So what that means is when you have a dream, say, well, I have dreams about seals. My primary animal totem is seal. Well, no, actually my sixth chakra animal totem is seal. I have others, and I'm sure you guys do too. But the seal shows up for me at different developmental stages and does different things in my dreams. And so I've tended this expression of what this seal energy is about. Right, when seal is a baby, it is can get conked on the head and hurt by people because it can be victimized. It has to develop a stronger sense of self. I had dreams where the little baby seal was peeing all over everything, all over the floor and stuff. And then I had to hold it and it showed me its teeth, which represents like a developing ego, right? Like, because I'm the seal. Because in a dream, you're an extension of all the different characters that show up in your dream. You're an extension of all of those. Then I had a shamanic journey where a seal showed up on a cove. Then I went out to California to go to Pacifica to go to school, and there was that cove, and I would go sing to the seals. But the point of it is, seal doesn't stay the same, right? Seal is not just this flat symbol. Seal takes this journey with me. Well, last night Seal showed up. I took him to church. I don't even go to church, and he's like in my arms, and I'm like, oh, it's a baby seal again, you know. So that represents a part of me that's come full circle, that's in a more open, receptive, childlike place in myself. But you can think about this journey on your own, in your own way, and notice how your symbols change. When we do that, we allow the symbol to have a life that lives with us and grows with us instead of becoming flattened and becoming something that we take ownership of. It exists simultaneously, and we witness the journey, and that's when we can let go of this place of the ego and this need to literalize these images. So I invite you to listen closely to your image's aliveness. When an image shows up for you or a feeling shows up for you, notice when it shifts in terms of how it's held in your body. All of these things will teach you more about your inner life and what all of this information means. So archetypes express a polarity of energy. Think about the tarot. Do you guys familiar with the tarot? Okay. So think about, let's see, the card of, well, let's take the Empress because she's a good one, right? So the Empress represents the universal mother. She represents the divine feminine, the mother in all things. But she doesn't just represent that. She represents the good mother, the bad mother, the good enough mother, the way we mother ourselves, the way we mother each other, the way we mother the world, the way the world mothers us, right? So this is the polarity of expression that shows up around the energy of mother. Let's see. So we can set down archetypal identifications. So things that don't work for us, stories that aren't working for us anymore. And when we do that, I'm going to use the example of the gypsy or wanderer for my friend Don. So we may have a negative identification with that. Our family stories may have been, think about the gypsy. Does anybody have a negative identification with the gypsy, with gypsy energy? Anybody told that gypsies are dirty or that they don't have a home or that they steal, right? Yeah, okay. So these are negative identifications. They come from family, they come from culture, they come from our beliefs about what something is.
Sometimes experience.
And, well, of course, yes, absolutely. And when something bears that out, that's a really good point. Then we really have to go into this tailspin and go, well, is that true? And we can't do that if we're in black and white thinking, right? If we believe that already, where we're hunkered down in that safe place in ourselves, it's harder for us to say, how can gypsies show up and be really, really good? You know, how can that happen? That can't happen, right? So then we attach to our judgments, right? So these are old tapes. Now think about a positive way to see the gypsy or the wanderer archetype. Can you guys think about something that would be good in your lives and about the energy of gypsy or the energy of wanderer? What's good about that? Curiosity. Exploration. Absolute beauty. Absolutely. Freedom. What?
Appalachian Trail.
Appalachian. There you go. And that's when you, for instance, have now created a series of patterns. So you've gone from gypsy to Appalachian Trail, and you've made that connection, you know. So that's a positive complex. That's the idea of starting to create a positive complex, right? So, okay, awesome. Let's see. And it allows us to choose a new story, right? So then instead of like just in our lives, here we are and we're getting old. You know, I see this a lot of times with older women, you know, who, their looks have kind of fallen off and they're trying to go into this wisdom place, but there's no container for that wisdom place in our culture, right? There's just, you're getting older and you don't have young kids anymore, right? So they want to connect with this idea of wisdom in themselves. And that is a place where they have to start to create a container about what that looks like. And they can choose a new story, you know, so that the crone can be a positive thing. It can be a wise, silent, solitary place to be. And we can see that we can do this at any point in our life, right? So if we're telling a story that's old, that doesn't speak to us anymore, we can pick up a new story and we can say, oh, well, you know, for this long I've been a mother and I've been a partner, but I'm not in this relationship anymore and now I want to be a wanderer, right? Now I want to explore. Okay. So there's a wonderful book, and I'm going to move off a little bit because in the 1970s, Eugene Gendlin wrote this amazing book called Focusing. And focusing allows us to set aside everything that we're supposed to do and just put it aside and not figure it out right now. And allow ourselves to see what is evoked in us, what comes up through us when we don't feel like we have the responsibilities that we have to attend to in our life. So it allows us to create room for the possible. It allows us to feel into an idea about what something could mean or could be, so that curiosity that you were talking about. And so now I encourage you to go back to your archetype box with everything that you have heard this evening. So instead of working from the idea of this discrete archetype, like what you did before, imagine taking all the energy in of allowing all the connections that help you build on your archetypal awareness. So for instance, the idea that for you, Wanderer is connected with the Appalachian Trail. Allow yourself to move beyond your head. Move beyond what you've been told that symbol means. Go into your body. Just sink down below your neck. Feel it in your heart. Feel it in your gut. Feel it coming up through your toes. And allow yourself to tell a new story about what you could be in the world. Wherever you're at energetically on your own continuums, wherever you're holding a limiting belief, allow yourself to imagine telling a new story. What books would you read? What movies would you go see? Who would you hang out with that maybe does something different than the people that you've been hanging out with, you know, in your so many years at your job and at your office? What's under the surface? And what's drawing you now? Actively sit down the judgments about what you should feel and notice what you do feel there. When you do this, you're connecting with your observer self. You're developing qualities of self-reflection, and you're bridging the energy between the conscious and the unconscious. And you're connecting with each other. So, that is what I have, and I'm happy to take questions. Does anyone have any questions?
What was the name of that author again for Focusing?
Eugene Gendlin. And that's a book that you can use in therapy, or you can just read on your own. You can like be in a car, you know, going to your work or whatever, and just set aside everything and see what comes up. It's a great book. It's very helpful.
Do they have it here?
I don't know.
We do have it here.
Yay!
I think there's two copies on the shelf, right in the middle of this section right here.
Ah.
And for people who are interested in Jungian psychology but maybe don't want to dive into Jung, which is it's a lot, There's a great book called Boundaries of the Soul by June Singer, which breaks down a lot of these concepts, makes them much more simplistic, makes them much more accessible. So that's a great, great one.
Are you involved in that young house or the young? I've never been down there, but there's some place.
Yeah,
in
actually,
young
that's-
something.
Young House, yeah. I've actually heard some talks there. I'm interested in giving talks there, so I think that may be on the agenda
I've
on the
never
horizon.
been in there, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, I went to a talk there about the energy of 2013 and the whole shift that's going on, and it was a really good talk. It was very interesting. So yeah, it's a great, great resource for sure. So, well, I have cards. There you go.
Are you doing any other classes that will go into more detail?
I'll be doing tarot classes in the summer. There's been a lot of interest in private tarot classes, so I've been doing some Skype private tarot classes, and that's been a lot of fun. But I'll be doing a traditional, like everybody gather and kind of class in the summer. So,
And
yeah.
I can vouch that they're a lot of fun.
Thank
I mean,
you.
I made
I'm sure.
lifelong friends with the group.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I was thinking about my daughter when she asked about if Santa was real, and we were going through that period, and got to a point where she was no longer mollified, if that's the right word, with, well, what do you think? What do you
Right.
believe?
Uh-huh.
You know, and you asked her, what do you really want to know? Even if the answer is yes, or the answer, yes, I really want to know. And I told her, and she's like, oh my God, Santa's dead. You know, and it was just like so traumatic. And, for a number of Christmases, we had this repeating trauma. And then she declared in her teen years, I know that Santa's not real, but I'm choosing to believe he is real. And that's the way it was coming up for me. Even as a teenager, that she didn't admit that, but
That's awesome. Like,
she
keep
embraced
connecting with that magic. Absolutely. And that's really so important in our lives, right? Because we are such rationally based creatures, and we have to have proof for everything. A lot of times proof doesn't matter. The dream that we had, the stuff that it evokes in us moves us and changes us in a way where it may be in our imagination, but it's powerful, so it moves us. It's meaningful.
yeah.
So, yeah. And sometimes it's more meaningful than what's literally going on. Way more meaningful. So, yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about the wounded healer archetype?
Oh, I'd love to, actually.
Thank you.
Chiron, yeah. When I was at Pacifica, actually, I'll tell you just that the archetype in a box was not my idea. My dear friend Jenny Hart came up with the archetype in a box because she got constellating an archetype when we were in archetypal psychology class, and she came up with this, and I said, can I use the archetype in a box? And she said, oh yeah, absolutely. I got Chiron, and Chiron is this idea that where our wound is where our gift is. And Chiron was a centaur, and he was different than all the other centaurs, so he was the constructed other. Centaurs were these kind of creatures that were very, very party animal kind of energies. They're half horse, half human beings, so they have the vices of human beings and the energy of the freedom of horses, and they all ran in this group. And Chiron was separate, and he felt different, and he was wounded. And through his wound, he was able to come back and heal and hold this space for the other horses, and that's the myth. But it extends to all of us. So anything where we have our wounds, like in the first part of our life, when, we get to have all these great lessons about and we don't have very many tools yet, very much experience yet. And so we fall pretty hard a lot of times in our lives till we figure out what we're really here to do, what our mission is, what our journey is about. And when we're doing that, usually and often our mission, our not our vocation, but our mission, our journey, our healing journey, is about giving the gift where we were wounded. And it's easier for us to hold the space if we're able to go into our wounds and contain the tension of the opposites, right? Say, okay, I'm wounded here, but I've moved through this place, and I can help someone else who comes and has this same wound, And that is the energy of the wounded healer. And that's where our gifts are, you know. So it's an indicator that it's great to go into the shadow energy and really explore the positive expression of the shadow energy instead of push away from it. Our culture teaches us to push away from it, to say, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with me, I don't identify with this, this is other. But by drawing the other in, we see where we're part of that other. And that helps us release empathy and grow, so, on our journey.
That clip of the wounded healer, it's absolutely beautiful.
No,
And
what do you...
Of course, I forgot the website, but it talks and shows exactly what you're saying, that for any type of psychology work or counseling work, that's what's needed. But in a very artistic way, if I remember the website, I'll tell Bob.
Yeah, I'd love to know.
Yeah,
I'd love to
it's-
see it.
it's beautiful.
Probably it's on
Yeah.
YouTube or something like that.
It's not.
It's not.
It's a website that has a lot of these mythological little short video clips.
Okay, awesome.
There's something about the twin flames
Uh-huh.
and
That's another archetype.
Yeah.
The trickster,
Yes,
all
yes.
of these. So, yeah,
I'll
awesome.
look it up.
Very cool. I'd love to know more about it, for
Yeah.
sure. So, any other questions or discussion? Yeah.
Is the twin flame also considered an archetype?
Absolutely. That's the thing that's really interesting about these two discussions, is that the idea of what is an archetype for us when we feel that draw is a much more broad way of looking at it. When we listen to it in language, right, it's more discrete, it's more simple, like the twin flames is an archetype. But when we move into the place of noticing what we feel about the archetype, all the associations, like all the little, pieces, all the little filaments in the box, help color our expression of the archetype. So the archetype might be the twin flame, but for us it might have to do with horses. Like, I had a client who, for her, the twin flame was a horse. So it might be the expression of the beloved, but it's seen outside of the context of, does that make sense what I'm saying? So then you see the nuances and the magic that can occur, because it's this expansive definition that's based on this felt sense. It's based on this feeling of drawing towards something, as opposed to understanding the archetype as a distinct thing in language. Poetry is a great example of this. When someone writes a poem and they start out with one metaphor and they build on that metaphor and they use different kinds of colorful language and different kinds of metaphors within metaphors. That's the mythopoetic language, and that is how we feel the archetype in ourselves. Sure, absolutely.
It's a lot of wounded healers.
Oh,
I
you're
was trying
looking
to
for it.
find it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A lot of wounded.
Well,
I would recognize it, but I'll look it up.
awesome. Well, that's what I've got for you this evening, so thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, boy. You need little boxes back in here.
No, they're for you. They're for you, so you can work with them.
Reminds me of that.
Yeah, I'm going to give her an archetype. Thank you very much. Oh, and if you guys are interested in any intuitive sessions or counseling, come hit me up. I'd love to work with you. Or classes. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Got questions now.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool.
This is the coolest thing ever.
I'm glad. I'm so glad. I thought people people would like those. Thank you. Thank you. How are you? Good to see you. I hope you didn't mind that I used your example. I loved it. I thought about you when I was writing my talk. I'm used to gypsy.
Yeah, that made my night.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah, it was good reminders, and I liked hearing the all the science behind it.
Yeah.
Like some of the belief systems I have, I'm like, oh, that is really cool where that comes from.
Exactly.
So I felt very drawn to come.
Oh, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
For a general showing of how energy follows us, it was not like thank you. Oh, there's a spider.
Oh gosh, things are getting ready to go good.
Thanks so much for taping it. I totally